Hello, all. Dr. Jared here. Continuing with part 2 of 6 of Masterclass. So first of all, I just want to appreciate all of you that are taking time to empower yourselves. Is that we've talked about in the first seminar here. One of the biggest goals for this is empowerment, faith over fear. Certainly this is a very fearful time. And when we put a topic today of viruses, certainly even just saying that topic for the first time, in my opinion, in history, or at least in the history of my life that I remember, just saying that word can make people somewhat polarized. And so my goal here for today is to share some truth, to share some knowledge, but most importantly, to challenge or to help explore your philosophy, because really, so many things that we read or see, whether it's news or research articles, they all come through a filter. Everybody has a certain way that they see life, and depending on life experiences, depending on, certain things that have happened, your filter may be a little bit different. But the filter, more than even the research articles, often defines your behavior. So like I said, I'm going to share some things. I also, at the end, I have some additional resources for you, another video if you want to really dive in, and lastly, just an article for your own mindset. But topic number 2 is viruses. But before we get into viruses, I want to do just a short recap of the first seminar. So the biggest thing that people have said to me in the clinic so far this week since they watched the seminar is the topic of drifting. So outside of really holistic living or any of the other things that we talked about, the book Outwitting the Devil, talking about, are you drifting? Are you allowing things that are outside of your control to influence either your mood, your behavior, certain things like that. So really think about, are you drifting? And then what action steps are you applying to live your best life, to protect yourself, to protect those around you? I want to open up this virus seminar, really just talking about, think about what is a virus. And additionally, how often is someone an asymptomatic carrier? Because these two topics, maybe you haven't really thought about this before, but viruses are simply genetic information that are not really alive. They use live cells to replicate. And so, if you think about, how can a virus sit on a inanimate object? How can it sit on a surface? What does a virus really do? Think about this. In the other video that I've linked on here, it talks about that there are 10 to the 31th power amount of viruses around you at all times, meaning there are more viruses around you right now as you watch this seminar than there are stars in the sky, planets, whatever. It's this infinite number that we really can't even fully understand. Not infinite, but you know what I mean by that. Like it's huge. Now, certain viruses help us. They help our genetic code. Certain viruses can make us sick. But viruses are around us at all times, and they are part of life. They're essential to life. And so, when I talk about philosophically, thinking that you're going to sterilize the environment around you actually makes you sicker. It makes your body less defensive. It affects just so many things. But secondly, this concept of asymptomatic carrier, likely the term asymptomatic carrier, for many people, this was the first time they've really ever thought about it. Could they be infecting other people when they don't feel it yet? And the reality is, asymptomatic carriers are common in many, many illnesses. Another thing that I think is so ironic is that when you are injected with any sort of a live virus, you're an asymptomatic carrier. Terms like vaccine shedding. So like, for instance, if you personally get a vaccine booster or give your child vaccines, you actually shed this virus for a number of hours or days. the thing that I thought was probably least talked about, and I'm even going to use the word disgusting, is, when we talk about the flu shot actually weakens your immune system. So with the exception of what you're injected with, people are more prone to getting sick after this flu shot. So I can't say yes or no to this, but whether in Illinois right now with closing restaurants or talking about schools, or what if the increased number of cases that we're seeing right now, what if that's partially due to the fact that they're really pushing hard to vaccinate everybody with this flu shot? I talk about asymptomatic carriers. Kids, obviously, most kids don't like getting stabbed with a needle. And when they used to do the old up the nose flu, I think they still called it a vaccine, but whatever they called it, kids were asymptomatic carriers in their classroom for days, commonly weeks. In fact, they could be a carrier for as much as 28 days after they received that dose. So think about that. If you talk about asymptomatic carriers, people are asymptomatic carriers frequently and sometimes by choice, but also things like the cold, the flus, just certain stuff. I mean, this has been around for a long, long time, and never before have we worried about an asymptomatic carrier. But ultimately, we're also not wanting to. So many people were actually being told to avoid exposure to viruses, when I would tell you in a short term that might be good, but in the long term that's really negative for your health. So, and where does this come back to? Really, this comes back to theory or your philosophy. So if you want to get a much better assessment of this, just type in on Google terrain theory, TERRAIN, terrain theory versus germ theory. So I think almost everybody watching is likely familiar with the germ theory. The germ theory states that if you come in exposure with a germ, your body may develop a symptomatic response. You may get an infection. The terrain theory came out at the very same time, and it's rumored, or it's stated that Louis Pasteur, the founder of the germ theory, or you might be familiar with pasteurization, stated on his deathbed that it's not the microbe, it's the host. And that's what terrain theory really stands for. On our last video, a couple of the people posted the fishbowl that I talked about, which has a dirty fishbowl and a clean fishbowl. And so what terrain theory says is the stronger the host, the less worrisome it is for the exposure. And so we should be spending our time strengthening the host. And this goes back to a lot of the things that you can control. This goes back to exercising regularly, eating healthy, getting adjusted, detoxifying, chronically exposing yourself to all sorts of germs so that you build lifetime immunity. Lifetime immunity is a big deal, and that does not come anytime you receive an injection. So think about this. Are you a germ theory person, or are you a terrain theory person? Are you walking around with gloves and a mask on and thinking that that's protecting you? Or are you possibly wearing a mask out of courtesy, but knowing that you're working to strengthen your body so that you are less likely to be a transmitter? Here's the other thing about terrain. When they talk about, quarantine for 2 weeks, do you really think all people are asymptomatic carriers for 2 weeks? Or do you think it's the weakest people, the people with the weakest immune system, the people that are least likely to be able to kill off that virus or that bug quickly? The reality is, if you look at terrain theory, the stronger the person, the quicker they're contagious. And that should be a big deal. That if you're really when I've heard somebody say, and I very much don't agree with this comment, but like, you should get a shot for because you care about others. You should take care of yourself because you care about others. You should build your body up because you care about others, because strong, healthy people aren't the ones that spread this stuff. It's the weak immunity people. So A couple of quotes from some chiropractic historians. D.D. Palmer is the originator of chiropractic. He was the one who gave the first chiropractic adjustment. And for those of you that remember this, keep in mind, chiropractic certainly not just for back pain relief or neck pain relief. The first chiropractic adjustment was delivered for someone that had an injury that caused them to lose their hearing. And when they were adjusted, their hearing was restored. But D.D. Palmer says famously, I desired to know why one person was ailing and his associate eating at the same table, working in the same shop at the same bench was not. Why? What difference was there in these two persons that caused one to have various diseases while his partner escaped? Again, terrain theory versus germ theory. B.J. Palmer, his son, I would say famously said, but there's quite a few people who are termed with this quote, if the germ theory of disease were correct, there'd be no one alive to believe it. So it goes back to your immune system. There was a study that I read a long time ago before I had children that talked about the best way to build your kid's immune system was to take them to the New York subway and let them crawl around on the floor. Now, I don't necessarily fully want to do that. I don't. I never have with any of my children. But what's the point? The point is that let your kids get exposed to stuff. You know, before school started, the coronavirus had claimed the lives of less than 100 children under 15 years old. Now, I know that they talk about, well, they're the ones spreading it to their grandparents, but keep in mind that the same people that are saying that are the same ones that have been talking about how this year's flu was going to be the worst flu ever for 30 plus years. And if you follow that history of the flu shot, remember that originally only the elderly and immunocompromised were recommended to get the flu shot, and it did not work. It did not save any lives. And so then they blamed kids and said that kids were the ones spreading it to their grandparents. You even see on TV, I remember last year so specifically, these emotional commercials where they show like little Johnny never meant to kill grandma. Talk about fear tactics, fear mongering, and complete BS. Look at your philosophy and assess where does it really come from? Where is your belief lying? The last thing I want to mention when you talk about exposure is a fever. You know, right now to get into school, my kids have to get their forehead thing. When you walk into certain restaurants, they want to check to see if you have a fever. You know, as a parent, we are the first generation of people who are told not to embrace a fever. What is the purpose of a fever? A fever is your body using its natural defenses to kill things. In fact, you can even trace it for many numbers. A fever of 102 is typically high enough to kill bacteria. A fever of 103 is high enough to kill most viruses. So your body raises your temperature to kill it. So when you talk about, let's say, exercise, when you get your heart rate way up, guess what? Your body temperature goes up too. And what happens? You kill bad viruses, you kill bad bacteria, your immune system is stronger. Now, I can understand, again, if for those that are dealing with the, trying to protect the immunocompromised, or maybe somebody who's a little bit weaker, checking to see if someone has a fever, but looking at a fever as a bad thing is crazy. It's absolutely nuts to look at a fever as a bad thing. Your body should have a fever as quickly as possible when it realizes there's foreign invaders or things that could harm it. And, this whole idea of giving kids Tylenol to break a fever, I can't even talk about it without my stomach churning. I forget whatever they call it, immediate cares, right here in Rockford, they had this billboard last year that said, because 102 can't wait. And I even had a couple of nurses tell me that, a fever of 102 causes brain damage. And that is absolutely not true. It's absolutely not true. It's not until 105 plus that you can have this damage to your brain. And it's only with certain things like bacterial meningitis, which again, is more prevalent because of some of the medical interventions that we do, like chronically giving antibiotics and allowing antibiotic-resistant bacteria to grow. So last, comment when we talk about fevers is not about fevers at all, but look it up. So on October 21st, Purdue Pharmaceuticals just filed bankruptcy protection, and Purdue Pharmaceuticals, which you're probably not aware, but I wasn't either, is the producer of OxyContin. Now, OxyContin is an opioid. It's one of the most popular opioids. It was one of the first opioids. Now, opioids are for typically chronic or severe pain. And what did they file bankruptcy for? Well, it was because they were fined $8.7 billion. And what did they do? And what does drug company after drug company after drug company do? They were fined, and they felt 3 felony charges for paying doctors illegally to prescribe opioids that allowed for opiate mills. They falsified research so that they made their drugs look to look better and not show how terrible they were for people and how addictive. And they paid medical records companies to push their drug to the top so doctors were more likely to prescribe it. Now, think about this. If a drug company can pay to falsify data, if they can pay to falsify research, do you think anybody else can or is? Up to you. I mean, you have to decide what you believe. But here's the thing that has been shown over and over and over. And whether you talk about, Bill Gates or, stuff released by the CDC or the World Health Organization, their largest contributors are drug companies. I'm going to say that again. Their largest contributors are drug companies, either through backdoor, philanthropic 501(c)(3)s or directly. But this is the scary thing. And this is why you have to look at philosophy. Yes, absolutely look at research. But if you're watching the news, ask yourself this: is the news being biased toward you? And I think at this point, 7 months in, almost everybody can see that. Now, here's another thought. 70% of your immune system is housed in the gut. 70%. So when you're exposed so frequently, yes, it can go in your nose and lungs, but if it goes in your mouth and in your digestive tract, that's roughly 70% of your immunity. So should you be taking care of your gut? What are some things that help that? For instance, when we go back to healthy foods, garlic, onions, certain foods like that, those are great at both feeding the good bacteria and killing bad stuff that's in your gut. Processed foods, terrible for you. Cheap meats, terrible for you. Antibiotics that are in non-organic dairy and non-organic meat kill and throw off your gut biome. Taking an antibiotic, let's say for a sinus infection, kills your gut biome. Putting on hand sanitizer kills your gut biome. Now, if your immune system's in your gut, I just had somebody yesterday say to me, well, I'm being very cautious. When I walk into Walmart, the first thing I do is find the hand sanitizer station to protect myself. Well, again, if that's the way you choose to protect yourself, that's up to you. But remember, that is short-term protection. And every single time that you do it, you actually damage your body's long-term ability to protect itself. There's a reason why, so many doctors over the years talk about like eating dirt and playing outside and exposing yourself, because this whole idea of sanitizing the world, to me, is crazy. And again, you have to decide on your philosophy. And the beautiful thing of it is whatever you decide, you get to reap the rewards and benefits, and you get to reap the repercussions. But again, your immune system's housed in your gut. So what you eat, the good bacteria you eat, the raw foods that you eat, the whole foods that you eat, the vegetables and the herbs and the garlic and all that stuff that you eat, so vital. Every time you put in stuff that kills bacteria, whether those are antibiotics or hand sanitizer, you harm your immune system. It is that simple. Comorbidities and viruses. So when we talked about the 5 essentials last time, think about this. I said this last time too, but comorbidities and your risk with a virus, obesity, a BMI over 40, 900% increase in likelihood if you get the coronavirus that you'll be in the ICU. So for those, again, that are seriously concerned with the current situation we're in, losing weight is a big deal. It's a big deal. Heart conditions. I also mentioned this on the last one. Coming right out of the paleocardiologist, for instance, with high blood pressure, huge risk factor for having heart issues. Having high blood pressure increases your risk of a heart attack, a stroke, and kidney issues. Taking high blood pressure medication to lower it instead of you lowering it, according to the book, doesn't necessarily lower your risk of a heart attack. It mildly lowers your risk of a stroke, and blood pressure medications, depending on the type, can actually harm your kidneys. So think about that. Taking a drug to manage the symptoms so often is not as good as actually having health and doing the things that matter. And hopefully, watching these, you personally are more motivated. Diabetes, again, diabetes is a huge, huge risk factor for increased things with the current pandemic going on. And one of the certain types of diabetes medication, they actually make you more prone to a respiratory illness. And guess what corona is? It's a respiratory illness. So doing something like eating the advanced plan, losing the weight, getting your insulin sensitivity down, getting off the diabetes medicine, big deal. Now, type 1 diabetes is different, but type 2 for many people is reversible. And some people, if you've had it a long time, you might need help. And that's where our integrative clinic comes in. That's where our mountain program comes in. We have specific programs that can help with your pancreas, with insulin sensitivity, with so much of this. So you can do it on your own. You can read it in the book. But additionally, it's type 2 diabetes and then weak immune system. We talked about that. Think about so many people that I hear about developing symptoms with COVID are people who have sheltered in place for long periods of time. And think about why that is. They've sheltered in place. And again, especially for the immunocompromised, I can understand it. But when you shelter in place, you're not exposing yourself to viruses and bacteria that are adapting in the world. And so your immune system actually gets weaker. Not being exposed, it's kind of like exercise. For those people that didn't exercise because their gym closed, they had weaker muscles and weaker lungs if they didn't find a different way to exercise. Not exposing your immune system to viruses and bacteria causes it to get weaker. It's just like a muscle. The more you expose it to stuff, the stronger you are. So a couple things, again, for building this immune system. Exercise helps radically. Diet helps radically. Exposure helps radically. Couple of things when we talk about exposure. One thing that I personally have done, many of you are clients of ours, that we, depending on the day, I might personally put my hands on 30, 50, sometimes 100 different individuals in a day. And when my children were born, I would come home and I would put my finger in their mouth. So why? Because I wanted them to build immunity. So anytime that they appeared to be in very good health. Now, if they were a little snotty, if they were cutting teeth, I didn't necessarily do that. But again, embracing this terrain theory, I started exposing my kids to stuff very early on. My wife and I, when we go to the gym, we put them in the daycare. Why? Because daycare kids are actually shown to have stronger immune systems because they're exposed to more stuff. So even long before this is just a philosophy difference, always putting them around things. Right now we're not allowed to say this. We're not allowed to tell people to come in when they're sick. And so our policy currently is to avoid coming in if you're symptomatic. But remember, chiropractic has been shown to shorten the length of time you're sick. It's been shown to boost your immune system. So for my entire career before March, we recommended anytime people had cough, cold, flu, whatever, we recommended that they come in. And I can tell you, when I talk about the 5-year chiropractic and immune system study, remember, I'm not saying someday it's going to happen. Someday I'm going to miss a day because I'm sick. But I personally have put my hands on hundreds and hundreds of people with active flu and never gotten sick from it. And we've never had an outbreak in our clinic or something like that. I say that because I want to stimulate your brain to think about why. And the other part of it is, again, I'm going to continue to negatively talk about flu shots. You can read, there's actually quite a bit of censoring, even as I look for things on my phone as I research this. But, when we talk about the flu, like the fact that myself and many of our, well, all of our staff and doctors and my family members, not getting the flu shot, I can tell you, because of being exposed year after year to all the different variations of flu, I have long-term immunity and likely lifetime immunity to every single strain that's so far existed. And remember, there's 2 to 4 different strains per year. The flu is constantly mutating. If you look at how long does a flu shot last, some studies show that it lasts 5 years before you're now no longer immune. Some studies shows that it only lasts a year or two. There's a study that's shown by the CDC that actually shows that you're not immune at all for the first 2 weeks. Then you're at your strongest at a month, and within about 3 or 4 months, it starts wearing off for some people. Now think about that. You don't develop long-term immunity. So people, again, I said this at the beginning of the pandemic. There was a study that was released in the Rockford Register Star that was from the University of Illinois Rockford that said for people that got 5 flu shots in a row, they were more likely to die if there was a pandemic, if there was a true pandemic that was truly deadly. H1N1 that was 2008, 2009, that currently has killed way more people statistically. H1N1, you were 36% more likely to catch H1N1 if you got a flu shot. Again, why? It weakens your immune system. And one thing that I didn't say when I was talking about Purdue Pharmaceuticals and the opioids, not only did they lie, cheat, steal, kill people, but they didn't kill a few people. Look at what we're freaking out about and the hundreds of thousands of people that have currently died from corona. And remember, it's over 200,000 in the United States. There's at least 470,000 people that have died from opiates. And that doesn't include all the people that die from illegal drug use like heroin, which is the most common transition. If someone's addicted to an opiate, they're most likely to then go on to heroin or buy it illegally on the street. But just properly, not properly, but prescribed opiates, 470,000 people. So this isn't like just a few people or, oh, boohoo for that drug company. I mean, these are things that kill hundreds of thousands of Americans. And so for the outrage that and the polarization that's currently gone on, with what's going on right now, I would encourage you to think about, yet how much does the media play a part in polarizing? Because why isn't there the same outrage for opiates? Why isn't there the same outrage for drug companies lying and falsifying statistics? Remember, the United States has the lowest ranked healthcare in first world countries, ranking 37th and 43rd in the world for keeping kids healthy or for children's health. So the same experts, while I absolutely believe they're experts, it's not like we have a great track record previously, which is why I keep saying over and over, I would so strongly recommend you look at your philosophy versus necessarily just trusting what you're told. Last couple topics here. We're trying to keep these to 30 to 40 minutes. I did mention this in the first one, but I would really appreciate it if you would like or comment if this is resonating with you, and even share some action steps that you're personally changing or your personal philosophy. Would love to hear it. Continuing on here though, sugar weakens your immune system. So sugar doesn't just cause weight gain or just cause diabetes. Sugar weakens your immune system. So chronic consumption of sugar, bread, that kind of stuff. If you're really worried about your immune system, I've had a few people say that to me, and I've actually asked them, like, well, can I ask what you ate for breakfast, dinner last night, lunch? And again, I have to kind of laugh because a couple people have gotten offended, yet they're so concerned with how close I'm standing to them, but it's okay for them to eat terrible. I mean, again, if you really want your immune system to be strong, do the right things. Don't eat sugar. Don't eat crap. Follow the advanced plan. Advanced plan is very simple. 5 simple rules. Cut out refined grains and refined sugars completely. Eat more healthy fats. Moderate your proteins. Minimize toxins. It's that simple. It's on our website, rockford.maxliving.com. It's for all current clients. It's in your book. So it's something that you can do. Another maybe more common thing that you'd be used to is keto, eating keto or eating paleo. Think about this. People who eat truly keto are eating 60 to 70% of their calories from fat, and they can be incredibly healthy. So this may change the way that you think about eating. Like I said, exercise raises your body temperature. It's shown to boost your immune system. It improves your mood. There's a study that shows exercise can reduce illness risk by over 40%. So, and that's not going out for a slow walk. It might be going out for a brisk walk, but you need to really look at exercise as getting out of breath. However you're doing that, get out of breath. Now, I talked about the flu shot. I talked about hand sanitizer. This was something my aunt and godmother is an excellent nurse. She's been an ICU nurse and she helps manage heart conditions for a big part of her career. But she was actually the one who talked to me when I was maybe a teenager about antibacterial soap, really encouraging me not to use it and to use soap. So when they talk about wash your hands with soap and water, she used to make me practice. She'd talk about friction, friction, take that 20 plus seconds like you hear. But why is antibacterial soap? Again, it goes back to there's good bacteria and there's bad bacteria. And if you're constantly killing everything, you lose the protective barriers that your body naturally has on it. So antibacterial soap, just like hand sanitizer, there's a lot to say about how damaging it is to you long term. Similarly, these very strong cleaners, you think about all the surfaces and stuff. Not only are you breathing those in, which can damage your lungs, but again, you're killing anything that's a good symbiotic relationship in the environment. Next thing, again, we talked about mindset. That was apparently a big takeaway for people, but stress really weakens your immune system, which again makes you more susceptible to these viruses that are everywhere. They're everywhere. So stress weakens your immune system. So getting enough sleep, praying, meditating, reading books, like I mentioned, Outwitting the Devil and the book Mindset are two that I would strongly encourage you. And if you haven't read our Align Your Health or Cruise Ship or Nursing Home book in a while, I said this earlier, but here's two foods that I would eat a lot of if you're trying to help your gut and your immune system. I'd eat a ton of garlic and a ton of onions. A ton of garlic and a ton of onions. Those are two very immune supporting nutrients, but whole foods by God, such a good thing. Vitamin D, again, here's something, and I'm just putting it out there. You can do your own research on it, but vitamin D, all the way back in April, PubMed, which is our government's website, had 8 studies showing the benefits of high vitamin D levels and low symptomatic response to the coronavirus. Even Dr. Fauci and some of these other doctors have come out and embraced it. What's ironic is in the same time that they've embraced it, the CDC lowered their recommendation for vitamin D, stating that having a good vitamin D level, what I would consider to be a good vitamin D level, can cause kidney stones. Now think about this. If we're currently shutting down billions and billions of dollars of businesses, causing people to stay in their homes, wear masks and gloves, have kids not in school, all the damage. Do you really care about a kidney stone if vitamin D lowers transmission and lowers your symptomatic response? So the CDC's new requirement is 20 to 50 in your blood work. Forever, it has been 30 to 100, and most natural healthcare providers agree that somewhere between 50 and 90 is the ideal. Now, keep in mind, taking synthetic vitamin D, like you might get at Walgreens or Walmart, or from your medical doctor, actually, the prescription vitamin D is synthetic, is not effective. It only raises your vitamin D level to a certain point, somewhere in the 40s usually. So you're going to need to get vitamin D from a good source. I will tell you, we carry it. But there are other whole food or vitamin Ds that are more absorbable, and you do need to consume vitamin D with food, with a fat specifically, because it's a fat soluble vitamin. And the slide says 42% of the United States population is deficient in D. C, what vitamin C does, vitamin C, many people are taking that right now more than they have. I usually don't take vitamin C. For the last 7 months, I have been. And what it's done is it's shown to decrease the duration of an illness. So taking vitamin C on a regular basis boosts your immune system, shortens the amount of time you're sick on average. Zinc, this is something that many people take after they get sick, but again, it can reduce the duration. We carry all these things in the clinic. Echinacea, elderberry, other herbs, again, all this stuff like immunity support. Eat healthy, exercise, do the things that are natural, but supplementation is a big part of immunity support. So in order, I personally, if you're only going to take one of these, I would take vitamin D on a regular basis, followed by C. I personally only take zinc if I'm fighting something off. Max Living also does have an immunity support if you're really looking to be very, very zealous. So coming up next week, next Tuesday, we have cancer awareness. So we're going to continue this, and the word for those of you that are continuing with the masterclass or that are current clients that are also going to not only benefit from knowledge, but the $30 supplement credit. The word number 2 is from, FROM, from. So we will see you next week, and I hope you have a blessed weekend and share and empower people to live their best health and best life.